Welcome to the Sage Intacct product tour for organizations outgrowing QuickBooks. I'm Bob Shago. I work in Sage Intacct product marketing. Today we're going to look at why Sage Intacct has made big differences in the financial health of growing companies. We're going to do this by diving into the product and looking at a few of the ways Sage Intacct brings visibility and productivity to the finance team. We aren't going to dive into every part of the product today, but rather stick to those areas that are of general interest to most companies. If you're dealing with specialty areas like subscription contracts, project accounting, or inventory management, those are part of other specialized product tours. Today we're going to look at built-in dashboards and reporting, flexibility through configuration, and the automation tools that keep your team efficient and in control. We'll also look at how Sage Intacct's best-in-class approach connects you to other best-in-class services. Before we dive into the system demo, I'd like to set the stage a little with why we're looking at these particular areas. As a growing company, you face challenges in finance. Many of these challenges can actually become a bottleneck to a growing company. Are you seeing a growing number of transactions in both revenue and expenses? Are those transactions occurring at more locations where information is slow to make its way back to the main office? Are you finding the close and subsequent visibility taking longer and longer? Are you relying on Excel spreadsheets to report on key information? Throwing more people at the problem has its own challenges and often leads to less control over financials. Now let's face it, we should be celebrating growth, but often the finance team is stuck cleaning up a lot of messes created by growth. The reporting spreadsheets that worked so well when you were small become cumbersome and error-prone. Closing the books and using spreadsheets to get out the end-of-period reports can take so many days or weeks that the reports are out of date as soon as they're complete. All of this leads to questionable decisions being made on old or questionable information. Your business has requirements and processes you need to follow. Manual workarounds and spreadsheets cost you time and accuracy. When every location or department is making purchases on their own, you lack the controls necessary to capitalize on the new scale of your growing company. No one's holding vendors accountable, picking the best vendors, or capturing the benefits of volume purchasing. And approvals, where they exist, become a manually intensive game of find the manager. Continued growth in a competitive environment requires a more nimble approach to finance. In today's demo, we're going to dive into examples of a more nimble approach made possible through the power of cloud computing. An ideal solution would include reporting that's built in and configurable by the accounting team without the help of IT. It should capture real-time metrics that help the company see where they're going each day. And appropriate reports should be available for review by any manager or stakeholder without having to request information from the finance team. From a single login, finance leaders should be able to see financials across all their locations and entities, both individually and consolidated. And they should be able to see this consolidated view at any time, not just at the end of the reporting period. The system should be configurable by the accounting team to match their business requirements. And they should be able to reconfigure and align workflows, forms, and reports without help from IT. In purchasing, automated workflows make the process completely transparent, and approvals are automated as part of every purchase. Because finance serves as a hub for other business applications the company needs, it should be able to integrate with other systems to eliminate double data entry and other manual processes that often result in delays or errors. So let's go ahead and get started by diving into our first area of the product, built-in dashboards and reporting. As we look at visibility and reporting, we'll start with built-in role-based dashboards and then look at how you dig deeper, as well as how you, as a finance professional, create unique reporting to exactly match the needs of your business. I'll show you how you can use dimensions to filter and regroup data into meaningful information. We'll also look at how we combine financial and operational information to gain strategic insight into the business. As we look at visibility inside of Sage Intacct, we start with dashboards. This is a great place to start because it encapsulates a lot of what we're doing in the system to really give you the visibility you need and the real-time look at how your company's doing across the organization. I want to point out a few things about the interface as we move along. First of all, we're looking at the CFO's daily view dashboard. You could create a different dashboard for a different role, like a controller dashboard. accounts payable, accounts receivable, and whatever the roles are within your company, you have the ability to create as many dashboards as you want. And these are all configurable. A few things about the interface. We've got our 4 entities here. So this company is General Alarm. So they're a products company that sells alarms, but the things we're going to talk about could really apply to a lot of different types of companies. You could be selling actual products, you could be selling services, software as a service, maybe you're in healthcare. So there's a lot of different industries that examples I'm going to give can apply to. So General Alarm Company has 4 entities. So we're looking at the top level right now, but we could also look at Texas, Maine, California, and Florida. They've got these 4 entities. And the nice thing is I can go to any one of these. Say I want to go to Texas. I can click on it right from this top level. And I can go right to the General Alarm Texas entity. And I can look at the metrics and the information and do accounting within the Texas entity. So unlike QuickBooks, where you had to close a QuickBooks file and open another QuickBooks file, and they weren't really merged together and there was nothing that was rolling up, we've got everything rolling up to this top level as I move back to this top level dashboard here. Applications, you can see on the toolbar, we've got different applications. Here's our home dashboards, which we're in right now, reports, company information, general ledger, order entry, purchasing, accounts receivable, accounts payable, inventory control. A lot of these you should be familiar with, and they extend out further. You're able to personalize this menu. Then you're able to change the order of these, so you can just look at them in the order that makes sense for you by dragging and dropping these, moving them around. I could move accounts payable over by order entry if I felt that worked better with my workflow. And you can also create favorites. For instance, I'm looking at this CFO dashboard, and perhaps this daily view, I've actually got both of these as favorites, but maybe I wanted to also make purchasing operations a favorite. And now it'll go over into my favorites menu. So we create dashboards and really personalize the interface so you can get to things quickly that you need to get to. If we look at a particular application, like let's say accounts receivable, we get this great overview menu. It's showing us the things that apply to accounts receivable. It gives us our data elements like customers and terms, the different things we would set up as support data for doing accounts receivable work. And then we have the tasks, create an invoice, receive a payment, make a deposit, all the things we would do within accounts receivable. And then our reports. And these are actually more like drop downs that go to the different standard reports that apply to accounts receivable. And if we need more than that, we have this slide out menu on the right, and we can go into any of the reports. And we can also go into the setup elements and do setup tasks here. So everything's right in front of you to move within this application, within this module. We'll come back to this in purchasing, this whole idea of a workflow. I also like to point out that I've got another tab open up here. It says General Alarm, but I'm logged in on this tab as another user. So notice over here, I'm Drew. On this first tab, if I move back, I was logged in as myself, and I'm listed as a super user, meaning I have access to all the applications and I have access to all the entities. This would be a role for a controller, some kind of an admin within the accounting department. Now, Drew Jackson here, he is an employee. So notice the limited number of applications that Drew has access to. And within those, he can really only do certain things. Like within purchasing, Drew can only create a purchase requisition. Everything else in the workflow is grayed out. Somebody in accounting has to do that. But he can also have dashboards, and he can look at the basic employee dashboard, give him access to whichever dashboard you want to give him access to, and add things here that make sense for that role. We'll come back to Drew a little bit later as we go through the purchasing process. Jumping back to the top level under my login, we've got, we want to look more at these dashboards. As I go back to my dashboards, and I've got this CFO daily view here, I can see a couple of things across the top. First of all, I've got my performance cards. What performance cards are a group of accounts that we've grouped things together. We've taken all the asset accounts and built an account group. We're pulling the information, the current summary for this month. You could do it by year or quarter, report on different periods. We're pulling that information into this performance card. And then we're creating a comparison. In this case, we're comparing to the previous period, and we have this green arrow that says assets are up. Notice over here where expenses are up, we get a red arrow. So we get to control these things. These are all configurable. We can also take any of these and we can drill down. So if we go to expenses and we click on the amount on expenses, we get a drill down menu. And it shows me all my operating expenses for the previous month and the current month. So I can see that comparison that we were looking at. And I can even drill down further and find out, about things like professional fees. I see that I've got this $10,000 professional fee here. If I want to know what that was, I can drill down on it. It brings it up, and I can see that there was this expense, professional fee, other services, and I could go right to that transaction, and I could look at that journal entry, and I can see who put in that journal entry, any history behind that journal entry, and look at that transaction to ask questions and find out more about that. So we've got a lot of drill down access, immediate access. So you could have this open during a meeting, an executive meeting, and as people are asking questions, you can drill right into the information and get it right there at your fingertips. The other great thing is by creating different dashboards for different roles, you're not a single source of reporting for the company. A lot of times a company that's running on QuickBooks, we've seen that you become this single source for reports that need to be generated because of that all or nothing access you have to QuickBooks. You don't want to give everybody access. Here you can give limited access and give them dashboards that show the things they need, and then you can filter those and control them by location or by entity or by different dimensions, which I'm going to get into in a minute. When we look at how things are done in Sage Intacct versus QuickBooks with reporting, we see that we've got everything across. This is a continual roll-up. I'm not having to export data to get this rolled up information. Notice when I jump over to Texas, I have the same dashboard, but a different set of numbers because this is only showing me the Texas entity, and so I can go and do work in that entity. I can also bring in any charts and reports into this dashboard that I need to. So on this main one, I've got this net income by location. I've got this nice chart, and as I roll over it, I see that I can see the amounts behind each of these. I could also just show the data in more of a table format. I can click any one of these and they will expand into a menu. I've got my cash flow detail by location here. So we're doing a lot with this multi-entity breakout here. We can look at all our locations. Now, if we want to take one of these reports, we can go ahead and click through to view the whole report just by clicking view all. It brings up a prompt. How do we want to see this report? And we can tell it. We'll just go ahead and look at it in HTML. And then we can see this whole report in a way that we can expand it. So we can open up these areas and look at, what makes up net income and, what makes up the items not requiring cash in the current period. And so we can break these out and look at this cash flow detail by entity and see more information below the summaries. And notice that opened a new tab as well, which I just closed, so that you're not constantly having to jump back and forth or losing your place of where you are in the current tab as you open these reports or drill down. Another thing we could do with one of these reports is have conditional shading. So I'm going to point out this idea of dimensions. So what's a dimension? So we've got location. We've looked at, these entities in different locations, and we can filter on these. We can filter the entire dashboard, or we can filter an individual report. In QuickBooks, you have one dimension, and that is your class dimension, and you use that as needed. But inside of Sage Intacct, you have as many dimensions as you need. So here we're looking at the general ledger and the dimension structure. We've got this class, which you can rename to anything you want, but we also have customer, department, employee, item, location. Municipality is an interesting one because that's one that I defined for this company. It's a user-defined dimension, which is why we say you can have as many as you need. Project is a special dimension that comes when you've launched the project module. So if you're running projects in your company and you want to track expenses and revenue by project, you can do that using the project dimension and tagging transactions. And then vendor is a standard dimension as well. And so as we look at all these different dimensions and the dimension structures, you start to get an idea that you can divide and slice and dice your reports to get a look at these things. So let's look at how this might kick in with a specific dimension. If we go over to our report center, we see that we have a whole bunch of reports here. And I can go ahead and, we've broken out by the location dimension quite a bit. But we also have department. I could look at income statement detail by customer as a dimension. And I could go ahead and run that at runtime, when I'm running the report, I could do additional filtering on setting the department or the location. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, see if we get any data here. We've got a little bit of data on this report. And this is our income statement by customer. So we're looking at, particular customers, big customers. You can limit this to a certain group of customers. As we go back to our report center, we can look at not only financial information, but also operational information. Back on that dashboard, so we have the CFO daily view. We also have the CFO sales view. And I have an interesting metric down here, and that is revenue per retail hour by location. So in this case, retail hour is a statistical account. It's operational information that we're capturing. So part of the reporting from these different locations is that they list their retail hours. And then because we have the financials, revenue, and now we have the statistical information of retail hour, we can combine those and get these operational reports. And so I have this menu that can come up, this sales view for the CFO at any time. I can also look at revenue by item. Item is a good example of a dimension that we can report on. And so I can see how my 3 different items that I'm reporting on in this case are stacking up. And notice that my Defender Pro, this middle one, is my big seller, not selling a lot of this, this third item, the add-on motion sensor. So you might want to look at how those are performing. And this, where I've used retail hour here as an operational point, this could be anything. This could be head count, number of deals, types of patients, web hits. You could grab any metric within your business and load it into a statistical account and then compare it to your financials. And notice I've also taken this element and I've created revenue per square foot as a performance card up here. And the great thing about these dashboards is you create them, you define them. You can even create an auditor dashboard. You can create a dashboard and give permission to the auditor to log into that dashboard without having to give them access to all your accounting within the system. And then they have everything they need in that auditor dashboard with all the drill down capabilities and everything they might need to look into right there in front of them. We were over here in the report center. I want to go back there and point out a little bit about the report center. Notice I have all reports listed here. I can sort them by application, meaning I can just go down and look at maybe my accounts payable reports and just show those. I can go just to my financial reports and just look at those. Any of these reports are editable. Out of the box, we have dozens of reports that come with the system, but you may find that for your company, you want different reports. And so you can take any of these reports, like balance sheet, for instance. You may want to create a different version of a balance sheet, and you can do that just by duplicating the balance sheet. And once you duplicate that, you just give it a new name. Obviously, you'd want to come up with something more representative of the business function. I'm just calling it my balance sheet for the moment, just to show you how this works. And now I have this new financial report called My Balance Sheet. And I can go and edit that. I could have edited the original, but I like the original. I want to keep it as a good backup. And so I create this new one. And I can go and look at all the different rows. And I can decide which account or account groups get shown in these rows and the level of detail. What's the basis? Is it the period? Is it cumulative? Is it a percentage? And so I create these different rows, and then I get the columns that go with my report, and I can set these columns. And as I open each one of these columns, I can see that I can do a lot of different things with them. And one of the great things I can do is I can expand on a dimension. So I can take this and I can say, you know what, expand this by all my locations. And yeah, I want one level down with roll up so that I can see a subtotal. And I can go ahead and set that. And now what that's going to do, it's going to break out my report just as I saw on that dashboard, that report we looked at where I've now broken this out. I didn't have to create 5 columns in this report. I created 1 column and I said break it out by location. And the system broke it out for me in my report. And so from this report center, we can edit reports. You can export them as HTML, PDF, CSV, whatever you need. You can even export to Excel. If you still have things you need to do from time to time in Excel, this report can go out to Excel and you can do more with it. And then additional actions, you may want to process and store this. So you might want to store a particular version of this. You can view an audit trail to see who changed this report. What's happened to this report. You can schedule it to run. Schedule is one of the great things for getting these reports out on a regular basis. Maybe you build a whole package of reports for month end. You schedule them to run, and they just get run and emailed out to an email list that you create. And so you can go ahead and send out scheduled reports to people within your company and to decision makers. Within the reporting center, I mentioned account groups. These are under the general ledger, and they allow us to really make reports a lot faster than you could otherwise. Within account groups, we create all these different, I mentioned, assets on that dashboard. And if we view this account group, we see that it's just a group of accounts, current assets, fixed assets, other acts. I'm going to go ahead and go to the edit mode here so you can see us a little better. But all I've done is I've taken other account groups, and these are just a range of accounts from my chart of accounts, and I just group them together for reporting periods, for reporting purposes. So a common question we get questions about getting out of Excel. People are trying to get out of Excel, and that we actually, I show this, but then I get the question, do we need other reporting tools? And the answer is no. This is all built in. This isn't something that's an add-on. It's not something where you're having to integrate with another reporting tool. Everything's built in. In fact, we find companies that have moved to Sage Intacct rely heavily on dashboards and their financial and custom reports. We have training on building financial reports. We have training on building custom reports. And you can go ahead and build any of these yourself. In fact, custom reports is a little different from financial reports. Financial reports look at the general ledger and break out by dimensions. Custom reports, which can also be filtered by dimensions, they look at things a little differently. In the custom report, as you see here in the custom reports menu, I've got one already built looking for invoices over $1,000. And I can create and add any of these libraries, any of these reports to my report library anytime I want. And simply pick a data object that you want to report on, like customer, for instance. And then you walk through a wizard and you create this report, and it walks you through and gives you instructions in each phase until you've created this standard tabular or summary report. And so you can create any number of reports. It doesn't require any coding. There's no strings of code that you create to do this. You simply select the data object, and then you start selecting the different columns you want to show up in this report. And go ahead and cancel out of this. We don't have time really in this to go all the way through creating a custom report, but I want you to understand that you have all these reporting tools and all this visibility available to you within the Sage Intacct system, and it's all built in. And with that, I'm going to go back to our presentation as we move over to flexibility. A big part of flexibility is having the tools to grow the system as the company grows, and being able to do that without constant requests to some other department. As we move into flexibility, it's important to understand that there's a foundation of flexibility built into everything we've done at Sage Intacct. The general idea is that we feel that you, as the accounting expert or administrator or controller within the company, ought to be able to configure things the way you need them within the organization, and not rely on IT to script things or to create additional scripts for your day-to-day activity and configuration within the system. There will be times to go to IT, when you have custom integrations out to other services. We'll look a little bit at that at the end of this presentation, not at the coding part, but a little bit about the ecosystem. But in general, we want to be able to configure everything within tools and configuration menus. A great example of that is the ability to add companies. So we have our 4 entities here, but what if I needed to add another entity? How hard is that? I can just go over to the company menu. I can go down here to entities. It brings up a menu. There's my 4 entities. I have this little add button right here. Well, as soon as I click add, it's going to bring up a menu. It's going to give me things to define about this entity. I need to give it a name. I need to define certain things about this entity. Because these 4 entities in this particular company have a shared chart of accounts, I get continual roll-up. I could also create a system where they didn't have shared charts of accounts. For instance, you may be doing business in a foreign country. You have an entity there that has a government-regulated chart of accounts. You have to have your chart of accounts matching some standard. And so in that case, you might have to have a different chart of accounts. You can still do roll-ups through what we call global consolidations. But in this case, it's really simple because every new entity I create uses the Same chart of accounts, and then I just have to define different things about that entity. If I want to make changes to a company, I simply go to the company menu again, and I have company information right in front of me. And I can go ahead and edit that company information again because I'm the administrator. This isn't available to everybody. The naming, main contact, global settings, what time zone am I in? What's the logo for this company? You can upload your own logo. And we can set that for this company. We can set security timeouts. What are the timeout limits we want? What's our security policy in our company? How do I want to handle passwords in the company? And we've built in a lot of best practices. So we're not going to let you make big errors around passwords. We want you to be able to have security in your company. We want to follow good security protocol. You can set the accounting standards, fiscal year, tax month, the base currency. And this is interesting because I could set different entities with different base currencies, but those would all roll up to my top level base currency, which in this case is US dollars. And I can set my schedules. What are my work days in my area? What are my weekends? How do we define holidays? These different things within the system. I have control of all these things. I can also create personal preferences, and I can manage the different. So I have my preferences within the company where I can go and set things the way I want to see them as a user. Just like our other overviews, we have a company overview, and in there we can look at, we see a lot of different things we can do. Company information. We can look at all our different subscriptions all the different modules or applications, these guys up here that we're subscribed to. We can also manage our users from here. We can set user permissions. We can create groups of users, and this is really handy when you're creating reports and you want to apply those to user groups rather than listing every user. That within the user, let's dive into that for a minute. We have different user types, and so if I created a new user within the company, I would define the user type as a business or employee or project manager, as a platform user or a CRM, and those all have different definitions. And there's different costs related to those. So business user is the standard cost. Employee is a much lower cost. So you would basically create a few business users within your accounting department, and then everyone else would be employee users. Then you could create admin privileges that are limited or full. And the real difference there is a full business user can create other admins. And so we have role information as well for the user. So instead of just creating a set of permissions for a user, and I'm going to go ahead and jump into my user record. Here we go. And we can look at roles here. Notice I have a role that's listed here, but I could choose other roles. Perhaps I have a user that I want to make an AP clerk. And so I've created a role with all the permissions needed for an AP clerk and only the permissions needed for an AP clerk. And I can add, and these roles are additive, meaning I could give someone two roles, maybe an AP clerk and an AR clerk role. And they could have these different permissions. So I'm going to cancel out of here. We generally grant permissions by application. So if I go over to, I'm role-based, meaning I've applied roles to all my different users. So to look at the permissions applied, I would want to go to my roles. And let's just go ahead and look at this AP clerk. And we can look at the subscription information. Notice the only thing checked, meaning that the only thing that has permissions granted behind it is accounts payable. So I can go look at those permissions. And I can see that we have a group of permissions, but not all the permissions, just a few of them applied to this role of accounts payable clerk. And they're able to add and edit and delete vendors. They're able to add, edit, and delete vendor groups and bills and AP terms. And maybe they're able to reverse a bill. And so you can be really specific. I might want them to be able to reclassify, or I might not want them to be able to reclassify. Notice there's a lot of checkboxes here. If I'm creating an admin, I might just click all, or if I'm creating an employee type of role, I might just click read only, and that would set read only for all these different areas of the company. And then I could have the different reports within that module available. And so you can get very defined on the tasks that people can do. You can set users to be able to do just the tasks they need and not be bothered with a lot of information within the system that they don't really need to see or doesn't relate to their job. We also have this special one, this approver role that we set up for some users. And in that, we can list approved payments, and we can go ahead and set different levels of approval for a particular role. So a CFO role, for instance, might have all the levels, or a controller role might have all the levels, or a CEO, depending on how you've set up your company. And we'll look a little bit more at approvals in the next section I'm going to. But that's just a little bit about how modular your permissions can be. You can also set permissions by location. Notice that when I jump over to this other tab where I was logged in as Drew Jackson, and he is an employee user, and he's also limited. He's an employee user that only works with the Texas and Maine locations. So I can limit users to specific locations as well. And so they can log in. I could limit them to one location. They would just log into that location and only work in that location or that entity. So you have a lot of control over letting people get to the things they need without having finance be this single source of information or single source of activity for doing accounting work. Within this company menu, we also have some of the dimensions that we work with, like department, locations. These other dimensions are available within the different data areas. For instance, accounts receivable is where we would find our customer. Customers are also available under order entry. This is the same list. But under general ledger is where you would get to define, in your configuration, you can define which dimensions are important and need to be handled. So if I went to configuration, for instance, on general ledger, I can scroll down here to my dimension settings, and I could decide which dimensions I care about, which ones I don't. I could remove one. And then these would show up on the transactions. And then I would also decide if I want to force journal entry balancing across these different dimensions. And so you have the ability to set up these dimensions, manage them. And dimensions really tell the story of the transaction. For instance, if I were going to put a bill in, and I could talk about what location and department that bill was for, the vendor's going to show up there. Might even have a customer related to that bill if I was doing something like drop shipping. I also mentioned that we can, from the company menu, add entities. And one thing we can do when we add an entity is we can create relationships between these entities. So I could create hierarchical inter-entity relationships for accounts receivable and payable. And this allows me to handle in the background a lot of those, when we talk about inter-entity transactions, we can handle a lot of those in the background. So where in QuickBooks, you may be at the end of period writing a lot of journal entries to handle inter-entity transactions. Within Sage Intacct, we would just handle that automatically. The other ability that we have as a business user is the ability to add fields. I can go within customization services, and here's some fields that have been added into different areas, and I can go ahead and add my own field. Let's go ahead and add it to the invoice. And I'm just going to create a checkbox. We might just call it on hold or something. And so we can create our own checked boxes. Default value may be unchecked. But we have the ability to create, different data types, anything from checkbox to currency, email, text area, a URL, or a password field. And you have the ability as the administrator to add these. You don't have to go to IT to add this. You can really make these forms and different pages function the way that you want them to function. The other nice thing about any of these custom fields is that they are available for custom reports as well. So these fields, I'm going to add them, and the data behind them is going to show up in my reports. So we get a question that comes up, and that has to do with ease of migration. So this is something I hear a lot. How hard is it to get my data from QuickBooks into Sage Intacct? I kind of glossed over this on the company menu, but there's this little thing called data imports. And this allows you to import your data. And we have this whole set of different items here. So maybe we're in AP and we want to import vendors. And I can go ahead and get a template. And the cool thing about this template is it's specific to this company. If you've done all the setup and everything already in this company, this template shows any custom fields. It shows any information that's really important for your company. And when we look at one of these templates, just pull one of these up real quick. It's an Excel template, so you would export your data out of your current system, or maybe you have an ongoing imports of transactions that come from some other system. Maybe you're doing e-commerce on another system and you just want to import to get started and do an integration later. What this system does, it's got the name of the field. It ignores this second row here. That is the description for you. It's instructions on what kind of data goes in here. You know, what's the length, what's the value. And so you can go through and create these import templates. And when you're doing your first enablement, you have a project manager that helps you get all this right, helps you get these import templates populated and built. It really gives you the opportunity to look through the data in a table or an Excel format and clean it up and sort it and get it looking the way you need it to before you import it. But it's just as simple as now I save this out and then I import it into the system by clicking import, select the file, and in come all the records. And so we have imports for all of these different bits of data that we need to get in. Old transactions, maybe current transactions, customers, things like that. The question, how much do I import? Well, that's determined during your setup, right? So during implementation, consultants would work with you to determine, do I need 1 year of history? Do I need 3 years of detailed history? You know, how far do I need to go back for my company? And how much can just be summary? You know, is there a point, maybe a year or 2, 3 years back, that I can say, okay, right here, we're just going to take a summary and then we're going to bring transactions forward from there. And that really depends on your company. So I don't have a standard answer for that. Okay, and that really concludes the flexibility portion or the configurability portion of our demo. And now let's go ahead and move on to automation. As you might expect, purchasing follows similar workflows to those in order entry or inventory management. It also has some unique aspects that help you maintain spending control across your organization. As we look at automation, we're going to look at purchasing. Now, automation is one of those areas in the system where you can really get down to the ROI. You can see how many hours you're saving in your finance department and really understand the financial payback you get and the return on investment from the financial system. So in purchasing, I wanted to look at some of the automation that really makes your life better every day. So we're going to go through this procure to pay process. I've shown you this overview map before. This is the overview map for purchasing. And notice we have this workflow. Here we can create a purchase requisition. And notice in this particular company, there's 2 different documents for purchase requisition that we can choose from. And so that's just an example of the fact that you can create multiple workflows by creating multiple documents to fit into these buckets, these categories of requisition, order, a receiver or receive a shipment, and create a vendor invoice. We're going to start by creating a purchase requisition, but I'm not going to do it using my user. I'm going to jump over to the login for Drew Jackson. Notice here, Drew's logged in. He's an employee. And it's one of the few things he can actually do in the system. Besides putting in time and expenses, he can put in purchase requisitions. So if we go to the overview map for Drew, you see that purchase requisition is available. The rest are grayed out. I'm just going to click purchase requisition to create a new one. So here we have this new purchase requisition. I'm going to choose Blue Sky Marketing. And we're going to go ahead and order some things from Blue Sky Marketing. We're going to order, they provide us with these, with this printer paper. There we go. Comes in by the case. Drew wants to order 10 of those. $50 a piece. We see the extended price coming out at $500. And we can go ahead, we could put an attachment in here if we had a quote that we'd already gotten from the vendor. Or we may, if it was a product we were ordering, we may have a picture of that product that we could put in here. We could put a message in here, something about what this is for. We may have a number from the vendor. And We get down to this line item. I want to point out a few things. As we drop down here, there's this window shade or this drop down menu. I can take any of these. I could rearrange this line item and edit this and move these up into the inline menu if I used them a lot. But I have this area where I can add a line item memo. So I can do different memos per line. I have a description of the item. I can also set a location and a department here. If this was something like a dropship, I may want to set a customer. And I have these this user-defined dimension that I can set. And this way I can track these different dimensions, and then later in my reporting I can filter by these different dimensions on this transaction. I may also want to apply it to a product. I don't have one, or a project if I was doing project accounting. And then class, as I said, can be renamed and be used for various things. There's no items in that dimension at this point. From here I could go to the next drawer. I could just hide details. So I'm going to go ahead and hide this. So Drew is writing a purchase requisition to purchase 10 cases of this paper from Blue Sky Marketing. I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And notice that's pretty much all Drew can do. It doesn't even take us back to a list of those purchase requisitions. But to see that, we would go back to my login as an accounting user, a super user. I also happen to be an approver. And so when I go down here to approve purchasing transactions, on this approvals menu, I see that I have this purchase requisition from Drew Jackson for $500. And I can click approve or decline here and add a note. I also get an email about this. So if I didn't happen to log in, I'm getting a reminder that there's an approval waiting for me. So I can approve it from that email. I can also go in on my phone or my tablet, and there's an approvals menu. There's a special mobile interface for approving transactions on those mobile devices. And so I have a lot of options. I can also create a component on my dashboard to show me what's waiting to be approved. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and approve this. And as I said, I can put in a comment along the way and we'll approve it. So now I don't have any more approvals. I'm going to go ahead. I'm still in my purchasing application. So I'm going to go look at those purchase requisitions now. So that purchase requisition is now pending. I've approved it, and I can go ahead and convert this. I'm going to convert it to a purchase order. So once this has been approved, someone in accounting changes it to a purchase order. Notice everything comes through. We've got a header that tells us all about the transaction. We have all the information about the vendor, and we have that same item down here so we can now send this purchase order over to Blue Sky Marketing and get this order filled. So I'm going to go ahead and post this purchase order so it can be sent over. And notice now I have this purchase order in here in my list of purchase orders. From here I can go ahead and convert it. Let's say we've purchased it, a few days have gone by, we've received that order. I can print out the receiver and compare it to the order. And I can see that in the order I only ended up with 9 cases. And so we can keep track of that. I can change that at this point. I could create some other documents. Maybe I can create another purchase order for the one that's missing, interact with the vendor there. But in this case, we're just going to change it to 9 is all you get. And we go ahead and we can make a memo about that. If we want, we don't need to make a memo about it because we actually have an audit trail that'll keep track of that once it goes to the transaction level. So I've got this receiver, it's been adjusted, and I can go ahead and post that receiver. And at this point, I want to go ahead and run bills. And so I'm going to go ahead and convert this from a receiver to a vendor invoice. Now, as I bring this in as a vendor invoice, I get all that same information repeated. And I've got this piece here. And the difference when I post this vendor invoice compared to the other documents were sort of all living within the purchasing application. Vendor invoice is now going to report to the general ledger. It's going to go ahead and post that actual transaction to the general ledger, and it's going to create an accounts payable bill that we can go ahead and pay from. So I'm going to post this. And now I have all these vendor invoices, and there's some things I can look at here. So I can go view this vendor invoice, and I can see information about this vendor invoice. I can see the this header information about the transaction date, the totals, its current status, if it was a draft or if it's closed. I can look at all this information about it. Another thing I can do is I can look at the history of this invoice. I can see where it started, and I can click through to any one of these other documents that led to this invoice, the requisition, order, and receiver. And I can see what happened to each of these. Notice this was partially converted because we made a change. I can also go look at payment details. I can see that payment status is open, the bill amount is $450, total paid is 0. So I have this status around this vendor invoice. So if the vendor calls me asking about the payment status, my clerk can go here to this payment details page and look that up and know where we are, know if something's been paid, and we can track that down further. So that's just a little bit about the approval process and purchasing. The real idea here is that we go completely from procure to purchase in this workflow. We do a similar thing with order entry, where we go from quote to cash. We go from quote to sales order to fulfill order to send invoice, and then we receive payments. We also have the ability to change the workflow to match the way you do business. So later on, as your company grows, if you need to change the workflow, if you need to add additional types of documents, it's as simple as going into the purchasing configuration. If we open that slider menu again, we have that configuration down here in setup, making changes here, and then we have transaction definitions, and we can go add transaction definitions as we need them, or we can edit existing transaction definitions as things change over time. So an example of that may be if you have a workflow for order entry that deals with service work versus a workflow that deals with products. In your order entry workflow, you could set up different transaction definitions for different workflows in that area. One last thing I wanted to show in the area of this purchasing and approvals and things is the approval policies. So I looked at how we did approvals, but there's this is my purchasing requisition transaction definition policy, which means that I've created this purchasing approval policy on the requisition. So I'm going to have approvals. I could create them on each of those. I'll show you that, but let's just go edit this one. And you can see that I could choose which transaction definition this applied to. So I could have another set of approvals when we go from purchase order to vendor invoice, or whichever thing we're working with. But I put it on the requisition, and I've got a value approval. And as I dig deeper into that value approval, I can see that I've created a permission-based, meaning we set the permissions for the user as level 1, 2, or 3, and then I've set values, so dollar values 500 to 1,000, 1,000 to 2,500, and 2,500 and up for my top level. And so I've got these value approvals. I could create different types of approvals. I've chosen value approval, but I could have a progressive value approval where I have more people approving. I have it by department, transaction department, departmental approval, meaning the department that's getting affected by the transaction, not the one that the user's in. So those are different. I could also set it to just an individual user, an administrator within the system, to approve it. And so I have a lot of different rules I can set in different ways to match my company policies. That really concludes this automation section. And let's go ahead and look at the integration part of this demonstration. We really want to be our customer's partner for the life of their business. Part of that is being able to grow with them by integrating with solutions that change as their needs change. As you grow, you're going to find that other partners are a best fit for other aspects of your organization, like CRM, payroll, and planning. As a best-in-class solution, Sage Intacct integrates nicely with dozens of these solutions. You have the flexibility to choose integrated solutions that make the most sense for your business. You can also swap out these systems as you grow and change. The last thing we want to talk about is integration. This is this idea that we built Sage Intacct to be a best-in-class financial solution, understanding that there's other solutions out there that you're going to want to tie into your financials. And so we do finance. We work to be best-in-class in finance and allow others to be best-in-class in CRM, best-in-class in payroll, and so on. So as we dive into the demonstration portion, I want to show you under Company some of the integrations that are built in and available for you within the system. We'll go to Subscriptions. So there's some configurable integrations that are built in that we've pre-configured for you. And then there are integrations that you would connect to, and I'll show you those in our marketplace. So first of all, there's things you would choose right here inside the system, such as Advanced CRM integration, Avalara tax. So this would be Salesforce integration, connecting Salesforce to order entry or projects or contract, depending on how your business is organized. Avalara tax, which calculates sales tax and VAT. It's a more advanced way of doing your sales tax. Sage Intacct has a very simple sales tax engine, and then we created this integration to Avalara to handle situations where you're dealing with taxes in different states and different counties and different things like that. So you can do much more complex tax calculations for sales tax on your invoices. And then we also have a built-in open air integration, and we mentioned Salesforce. It's just there's two different Salesforce integration pieces in here. A big one was launched in the last little while was the vendor payment services with American Express, which includes check or electronic payment, such as ACH or American Express corporate card payments. And it really automates, it increases security, reduces cost, and in some cases where companies have moved a lot of their payments over to their corporate card, they're actually seeing benefits that are paying them back, some to the point that they're paying for their whole Sage Intacct system. We also have integrations with Wells Fargo, payment manager there, and Zawara. And so those are some of the built-in things we have. But we also have this whole ecosystem. Let me jump over to our Sage Intacct site. If we look at partners and Sage Intacct Marketplace, we have a whole list of different vendors in different areas. Actually goes on for several pages. But let's take, for instance, payroll. We have several different options to choose from in payroll for handling payroll. And these are companies that have already built integrations. They understand how you need to connect their system to Sage Intacct, and they know how to talk back and forth. We get to point of sale systems. We have several really robust systems there. So there's actually dozens of these marketplace partners that have already created integrations. So you can choose the ones that work best for your business and match those up with your financials in Sage Intacct. With that, I'll jump back to our presentation. So why choose Sage Intacct? We're the right partner to help with your success. As a leader in innovation, we are recognized as a visionary by industry analysts like Gartner. We're the cloud computing leader in customer satisfaction with a rating of 98 out of 100 on G2 Crowd across over 2,000 reviews. We're the first and only preferred financial solution of the AICPA, and we're the preferred choice of the IFAC. Thank you for spending time with me today. I hope you saw some things that align with where your finance team is going. We'd love to hear from you and even do a demo of how Sage Intacct can meet your specific needs. If you want to learn more about Sage Intacct, you can try our 30-day trial, attend additional webinars, follow us on Twitter, or connect with us on Facebook, or contact us directly. Thank you.